Being one of the oldest people left around the Veda Mills, I had a pretty good memory of things that happened in the early days, and several of the people suggested that I write a book and keep the history intact, and if I didn't do that, a lot of it would be lost. And I thought about it for a while, and so I thought, okay. And I started about 8 or 10 years ago to assemble material, and people were very helpful. They loaned a lot of nice pictures and gave a lot of information. A lot of the information in the book is from my memory, and I'm blessed with a pretty good memory for things that happened long ago. Not too good for present things that happened, but so that's the way I got started with it, really. A lot of it came from memory from when I was a young boy. I always had a sense of nostalgia, excuse me, and when people would talk about things in the early days, I kind of soaked it up, and it came to me in later years. And in addition to that, different people gave me papers that had the old accounts of the Veda Mills on it, and that was very helpful. And of course, the Farvers, Beverly and Earl Farver, had a lot of early historic material that they furnished me to help out a lot on the book. And then a lady by the name of Alma Rogers, that's a well-known name around the Veda Mills. She died several years ago, but she wrote the history of the Veda Mills, and I got a hold of that from her grandson, and that was most helpful, along with many other things, and there are probably some papers that I'm forgetting about, but actually, some of the old accounts in the Steuben Republican, those were taken from the library where they had the photoprints of it. Those were helpful. So all in all, it basically made something I could work with. Growing up in the Veda Mills was wonderful. I didn't know it at the time, but we were living in a fun park. The kids had a nice mill pond to swim in, fish in, an old mill to play in, and we didn't realize it. We were just having the most wonderful time of our life, just like a big old fun park. I'd say it was great. And on a comparable basis from that to city living, just no comparison. The people in the small town back in that early period, they were more or less landlocked. Transportation was very poor, about non-existent. If they wanted to go anywhere, they take a whole day off to get to Angola on a horse and buggy and back, and same thing to Orland or Fremont. And so they're more or less confined to a small area, and it made a big happy family out of it, because lots of times the guy married the girl next door, and they had their little fights going on and their little things going on, but you knew everybody by the first name, and I'll repeat, it was pretty much like one big old family, and a very delightful way to live, I think. And I really appreciated the fact that I was able to grow up in an environment like that. Well, we were raising fish for the conservation department, and there were 6 or 8 fish ponds, and we're raising bluegills and bass. And one particular pond, we noticed a bass would follow along the edge of the water and seem to be more tame than the others, and we started throwing bait out to that. And then as the bass grew larger and more tame, and we had a little dock built out, it would come and eat out of your hand. And from that point on, we trained it to jump out of the water and take a frog or a night crawler out of your hand, and eventually to even jump through a hoop. Well, the word got out, and Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette sent a man up and to take pictures of this, and eventually it went on Associated Press and all across the country, and I understand some foreign countries. And Harry Truman happened to notice it, and being a fishing enthusiast, he wrote me a nice letter about it, and I returned the letter, and we corresponded back and forth a little bit. He sent me his picture, and that's how a little old country boy kind of got acquainted with the president. And his picture is in there in the book, and an account of that. Yes, he autographed that. And also he wrote a 3-volume book, Memoirs of Harry Truman, and he sent me a book and signed that and sent it through the mail. And very nice of him to send that. Well, time marches on, and comparing Nevada Mills now to what it was in earlier years, you could hardly recognize it, really. You have a new dam down there, and with the exception, some of the houses are pretty much the way they were. And of course, the old people are gone, and you see new, fresh people coming in and coming and going. And we have another nice little store there, Betty Perry, and as the dam store. So we're back in the store business. We were without one for a while because the old one's burnt. And I'd say on a comparable basis, it's about like all the other towns. There's a lot of things have changed a great deal, but if you grew up in a town, you could still see some of the old things that would bring your memory back. The old mill was a focal point of, actually it was really the nucleus of Nevada Mills, that along with the store. But it was the first thing that brought a lot of people into town, and workers, and some of them would come in and build houses and so on. And the first mill, they had a woolen mill where they made shirts and clothing, and then also at the same time they had the grist mill. Later on, they had a cider mill in the bottom, and things changed around the Civil War period. This mill burned down, and then no longer was any woolen mill, but they built a new mill, and farmers, of course, came from far around and brought their grain, and they took care of it. In the early days, they had prospectors going around and looking at these streams to see if there was enough water flow in there where they could put a dam in it, and then following that, put the mill in and then use that water for the source of the power. So we're getting our sequence right here. You put the dam in first after you find out there's enough water flow, and then you put the mill in, and then you run the water through the mill, and that's where you get your power. Brazil, my granddad.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. My father's father, yeah. And he had a blacksmith shop on the, what's called the flume part. There was 2 different water sources that came out of from under the bridge. The one that run the main mill, and then there was one on further to the south, where they released water through there as a matter of maintaining the proper level up above. And they had huge culvert that went under there, and then of course that made another stream that went down, and then the two met together a short distance west of there in kind of a Y formation, and the blacksmith shop was on the flume side. Seemed like the country store was the focal place in the whole Nevada Mills, and Saturday night the men would come from quite a distance, most of them walking or bringing a horse and buggy, and some of the games they played in the store, they played checker games, and they'd rattle off a bunch of tales and tell lies and joke, and just have a kind of a good old time Saturday nights. And so the store was really, like I said before, was a focal point in Nevada Mills. And Mr. Terry was the kind of a guy that would promote all kinds of things going on there too. Ernie Newitz was really one of the homeowners in Nevada Mills at an early age, and actually his father and mother were some of the very first ones there. And so Ernie Newitz lived up above the dam, and this book, A History of Nevada Mills, has a great many of the stories furnished by Ernest Newitz. Those letters from Ernie Newitz were printed actually in the Steuben Republican. Okay. They were so much of an interest that each week, at that time it was a weekly paper, and every week he would have an account in there about the things that happened in the early days, and people got to look forward to reading that account. The whole account of the Valley Line would take a pretty good sized book, but actually it was started by a man by the name of Buckland, and where he got his money was that he originated the arnica salve, and this was sold all over the world. Germany was one of the best buyers, and old Mr. Buckland made a lot of millions or thousands of dollars at that time selling the salve, and he had to have a place to put the money, so he built the St. Joe Valley Line, and that went from Angola and around Crooked Lake and Lake Gage and over to Orland, and really was used quite a bit in the early days. And in building the Valley Line, it gave a lot of work to the men that back at that time when workers needed work and to make some money real bad, and that helped out a lot in the economy. The Nevada Mills Church has certainly been an institution that was badly needed, and it was a lot of workers in the church. And the book names the ministers that have been there for a long time back, and also it has a roster of the people who went to that church. And certainly it was a great thing in the community. And just about everybody pitched in and helped out in the church, and done a wonderful thing over the period of years. It was an ME church, Methodist Episcopal. At one time, that was the biggest willow tree in Indiana. That was planted by Israel Lucas in early days. He planted 5 of those willow trees along the edge of the pond, the mill pond, shortly after the dam was put in. And that one particular one, for some reason, might have been in just the right spot, but it took off and grew to immense proportions, and people came from all over to take a picture of it, and it was listed in the book as being the biggest willow tree in Indiana. It's gone now. gradually lost some limbs in the wind, and I think a Palm Sunday tornado and others just finally took it all the way out. I make a point of selling antiques here. I run the nursery, and then I've been involved in early Americana material, but not so much locally, but throughout the United States on a larger basis geographically. Yeah, I worked with Mr. McNaughton for 8 or 10 years and helping assemble early Americana things in 5 different banks in the county. And quite an enjoyable thing to do. I traveled around a lot. But I flew to different places and bought large collections. And when I talk about Americana, I'm talking about like early American objects, not only Native American, which is American Indian, but also early gun, early weapons of different kinds, and things pertaining to Western items, saddles, and you might say Civil War material, and anything that was a period item from that era. Well, I seemed like I fit right in with all the rest of the kids in the town, and we had a little bunch that run around together, and we'd go fishing and swimming, whatever, play games, and pretty much free and easy until I got to be about 8 or 9 years old, and then times were kind of hard, and got time to do a little work. And so we either worked quite a bit at home, or sometimes you'd hire out to some of the neighbors or maybe some of the farmers. You wouldn't make a whole lot, but you do what you could. And back then I remember some of my first jobs were for $1 a day. And but of course back that time you could load the back end of your car with your Model A with groceries for $1. So on the ratio, that wasn't all that bad. And so it was work and play and a nice balance, and enjoyable thing. And people had their little feuds and their little fights and their little things that went on in town. From that aspect, everything didn't just all flow perfectly, but that's the way it was, and I was very glad to be a part of it, as far as I'm concerned.
So how long did you stay in Nevada Mills?
Well, I stayed in Nevada Mills until I graduated out of high school, and at that time the high school that they used from that area was in Orland, and we had a school hack, and of course went back and forth, and then I graduated from Orland High School with the rest of the boys around Nevada Mills, and following that went to Manchester College, and then shortly after that went into service in World War II. In fact, I went in January the 5th in 1939, which lets you know that I'm ancient, and was in nearly 7 years. And then came back and got in the nursery business in Nevada Mills and run a nursery there for about 25, 30 years. We've lived in Fremont a little over 30 years. And we've enjoyed it here. We have a great many friends, and it's gotten to be home for us here now, too.